Previously on Criminalish podcast, James Jamie William Faith Jr. was born on May 11th, 1971. Jamie was described as well-liked, smart, quirky, happy, and peaceful. He was a tech whiz that liked to do things like play video games, drink a good glass of wine, mentor college students, travel, and cheer on the Green Bay Packers. Jamie and Jennifer met in 2005 on a blind date set up by a mutual friend, and they instantly hit it off. They got married in Las Vegas in 2012, and Jamie easily took on the role of stepfather to Jennifer's young daughter. So by 2020, Jamie is an exec at a huge company, and Jennifer is a well-regarded speech therapist. And this all brings us to the morning of October 9th, 2020. Around 7:30 a.m., Jennifer and Jamie Faith were out walking their dog Maggie. However, their walk was cut short when a hooded man with a mask on came up from behind them and shot Jamie multiple times. Police arrived at the scene in minutes and found Jennifer distraught and in hysterics. When police looked at security video from Jennifer and Jamie's cameras, they saw that 5 hours before the shooting, a dark figure was walking around the back of the empty property next to their house. One of the neighbors had even gotten a photo of the shooter's vehicle as he fled. Police were able to see that this was an older black pickup truck that had a sticker with a distinct letter T on the rear windshield. However, when they go through Jennifer's phone, they find a conversation with one of her friends where she admits to that friend that she'd been having an emotional affair with someone named Darren Lopez. Darren was Jennifer's high school boyfriend. Their investigation into Darren Lopez showed that he was a 48-year-old Special Forces veteran who lived in Tennessee. They found that registered to his name, he had a black 2004 Nissan Titan pickup truck. Using GPS data from Darren's cell phone, investigators were also able to track his movements from around the time of Jamie's murder. Around 1 p.m. on Thursday, October 8th, Darren left his home in Tennessee just 20 minutes after getting a text from Jennifer. Data showed his cell phone traveled down to Texas towards Jamie and Jennifer's house. He drove past their house around 2 a.m. and then turned off his phone again. This was 10 minutes before the dark figure was caught on Jamie and Jennifer's camera sneaking behind the house next door. His phone stayed turned off until 5 p.m., at which point he was located in Tennessee near his home. So on January 11th, 2021, investigators followed Darren while he was with one of his daughters and approached them after they pulled into a parking spot. Darren calmly got out of his car and allowed police to put him in handcuffs without resisting. At this point, they charged him with a federal gun charge and a state murder charge. In a police interview, Darren denied going to Dallas, but admitted knowing Jennifer Faith. So investigators searched Darren's home. They found more packages and letters from Jennifer. In these letters, Jennifer called Darren her soulmate and, quote, one and only love, end quote. They also found ammunition, a military-style bag containing the DVD and snacks he purchased on his trip, and an unregistered loaded .45 caliber handgun that they were eventually able to match to the casings from Jamie's murder scene. On top of all this, they also found Jamie's blood on the gun. With all this evidence, police are very suspicious of Jennifer. So they decided that at the same time that they arrested Darren, they would also bring Jennifer in for another interview. And when the detective finally asked her if she knows Darren Lopez, she tenses up a little bit. She tells detectives, oh yeah, we dated in high school. And when they ask why she never mentioned him, she's like, well, I haven't seen him since 1993. I didn't think it was relevant. And when they specifically accused Darren of murdering Jamie, Jennifer denies this was the case despite the GPS evidence implying otherwise. Detectives had also confiscated Darren's phone, but it looked like it had been wiped clean too. But unlike Jennifer, it seemed like Darren didn't know how to perform a factory reset, and he had just deleted the evidence. So a data extraction was able to pull some of the text history that hadn't been permanently deleted. And the content of Darren's messages would shed light on the true nature of Jennifer and Darren's relationship, and would be the first of multiple revelations in the case that would expose the shocking circumstances that led to Jamie Faith's death. Hi, I'm Cam.
And I'm Dev.
And you're listening to Criminalish, a true crime podcast where two best friends trade stories ranging from the wild and wacky to the downright messed up. So, as you heard in the recap, in part one of this case, we covered Jamie Faith's life, death, and the investigation. When we left off, Jennifer Faith was being interrogated because her high school boyfriend, Darren Lopez, had just been arrested for Jamie's murder. Now, before we get into part two of this case, I do want to extend trigger warnings for graphic descriptions of sexual assault and domestic violence. So like I said, when we left off, Jennifer was telling detectives, oh, my relationship with Darren was totally platonic. But what she didn't know was that detectives were able to get into Darren's phone and actually extract some of the contents of his text messages with her. When detectives looked at the content, it was clear that they had an active, intimate, and sexual relationship. They were texting things like, quote, I am so in love with you, end quote, and, quote, I truly can't be without you at this point, end quote, and had discussed moving in together. They also had explicit sexual conversations before and after Jamie's murder. Some of these contain topics like BDSM, voyeurism, and even rape fantasies. They had also discussed Jamie's murder investigation. After Jennifer had made a public appeal to find the car related to Jamie's murder, she'd asked Darren to take the sticker off of his car and clean the window. She also told him that if police asked him about their relationship, he should say that they're old friends that were in constant contact as Jennifer was helping him work through his divorce, and he should also say that she was happily married to Jamie. On top of all this, she'd added Darren to the 15-person group chat with her close family and friends where she'd been keeping everyone updated on the investigation, allowing him to stay on top of where the investigation was going and potentially have a heads up if police were getting close.
Oh, this woman is sick. I'm so sorry.
I have nothing to add there, except that she had even complained to Darren about having to do an interview with the media to spread the word about Jamie's death and the hunt for his killer. She said to him, quote, the reporter sucked, but I did fine. He insisted on having me look at a stupid photo book of Jamie at the end. Barf. End quote.
Oh, this woman is sick, twisted, and evil. And it's very much giving head bitch in charge. Because the defense, when you go to trial, is always going to be, she didn't know. She was manipulated by Darren to go along with this crime. The text messages rat you out.
Mm-hmm. They sure do. Because they'd also discussed Jamie's life insurance policy, which was worth more than $650,000. This was in addition to a $400,000 retirement fund that Jennifer was the sole beneficiary of. Jennifer had attempted to collect this money a month after Jamie's death, but it was blocked because the detective told the insurance agency that she couldn't be ruled out as a suspect. She also complained to Darren about this. They talked about using this money to purchase a house for the two of them in Tennessee. Not only was Jennifer the sole beneficiary of Jamie's life insurance policy and retirement fund, she'd also benefited from the community support she'd received after Jamie's death. I don't just mean them walking with her in the morning. No. Because Jamie was the primary breadwinner, neighbors had organized a meal train so that she and her daughter could eat. One of them even wrote her a $5,000 check. Another organized a fundraiser for Jamie's funeral that raised $60,000 in less than 1 week. Mind you, Jennifer held 2 memorial services for Jamie. These had only cost $6,000, and she didn't even end up paying for them. She began withdrawing from the fundraiser pretty much immediately. Within weeks, she'd taken out all $60,000 from this fund.
So we're just going to sprinkle a little bit of fraud on top of the murder.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus Christ. Have any redeeming qualities, I beg of you.
Right. And a look into Darren's finances would reveal that he was in trouble. By 2020, he was at least 4 months and $30,000 past due on his mortgage payments, and his house was under foreclosure. The water for his house had been shut off in October. And after Jamie's murder, Jennifer had transferred large amounts of money to Darren and bought him things like the new TV, plane tickets, and even given him access to her credit card. She used the money from the fundraiser to pay back the money that she and Darren had spent on this credit card. She told Darren that if detectives asked why she was giving him money, he should say that she was supporting him through financial hardship.
This explains why his house was in such disarray when the police went, and why this 55-inch TV just completely stood out from the house that is foreclosed on that doesn't have any running water. Dear God, dear Lord, come on, people.
So all of this made detectives suspect that Jennifer had hired Darren partly due to his combat and special forces experience. However, neither Jennifer nor Darren had admitted to anything. Even without a confession, it was clear to detectives that Jennifer Faith was a manipulator. In multiple instances, she provided them with false information and even dead-end leads to chase down and get them further away from the truth. She'd also coached Darren on how he should respond to potential police questioning. Because they couldn't directly prove her involvement in the murder, they end up charging her with obstruction of justice. She pleaded not guilty to this charge and was released on bond, but detectives kept a close eye on her and continued investigating. Darren Lopez pleaded not guilty to the murder charge and remained in custody as he awaited trial. While he was in custody, Jennifer had someone deliver a message to Darren in jail, letting him know that she was with him and would always be with him no matter what had happened, and that she would always be his.
That is the most suspicious thing you could do. That is literally the most suspicious thing you could do, because you would think that after you put your butt on TV and beg them to find your husband's killer, that now that they have your husband's killer, you wouldn't be telling him, I'm all yours. I believe in you, honey. We're going to make it through. The hell? What is wrong with this woman? I would genuinely like to know.
Same. So I guess on its surface, she maybe thought that this little note would make it seem like her claim that she didn't know if Darren had murdered her husband was true, because the saying she would be with him no matter what had happened and always be his made it seem like, oh, I don't know what happened. But detectives are even more skeptical, and they know that this message was for them as much as it was for Darren.
Yes, because hot take, to me, that doesn't read of I don't know what happens. That reads, I don't care what happened. I don't care if you murdered my husband, I'm yours. That's how that reads to me.
But you have to think Jennifer not all the way there.
You're right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It's cute that you tried to make it seem like, oh no, she just doesn't know. And sorry, unpopular opinion. But if I think my ex-boyfriend potentially, maybe there's enough proof to lock him up, killed my husband, I'm not sending him any notes.
No.
I'm not giving him access to my credit cards. I ain't putting no money on his books. Ain't no commissary coming from me. I'm just saying.
So because Darren was in jail, his ex-wife, who was his ex-wife at this point, was helping him take care of his finances. To do so, he'd given her access to his email. And as she was going through his email, she would stumble upon communications with Jamie that would expose the true nature of the motive behind Jamie's murder and shock detectives and the community. What Darren's ex-wife had found was months of emails that showed how Darren and Jennifer had first connected and how their relationship had gotten to the point where Darren thought he needed to kill Jamie. I said what I said. I know what you're about to ask me. Yes. Communications with Jamie. I meant to say that.
Okay, I'll wait because I'm confused.
So we're going to back up a bit.
Please do.
So in 2019, Darren had separated from his now ex-wife. And as a result of this, his life was changing a lot. Even though he still saw his daughters, they usually spent more time with their mother. And that New Year's, he resolved that he would make more of an effort to connect with people. However, when the pandemic hit, it became much harder to connect with people, especially because his ranch was in an isolated and unincorporated part of Tennessee. Because of this, he turned to virtual ways of connecting with people that he cared for but hadn't spoken to in a while. And Jennifer was one of those people. In March of 2020, Darren sent a message to Jennifer on LinkedIn reaching out. Within the hour, Jennifer responded, and they soon moved their communications to email. Darren sent Jennifer a long email telling her about his life over the past decades and told her how he'd never forgotten about her. Jennifer also stated that she thought about Darren a lot and had searched for him but hadn't been able to find much aside from him being married and living in Tennessee. She told him about her failed relationships that led up to meeting Jamie, and even sent Darren a photo of her, Jamie, and her daughter. Despite it being clear that Jennifer was in a happy marriage, their communication soon shifted to being flirtatious and reminiscing on their high school relationship. The next day, Darren called their reconnection, quote, a great love story, end quote. This is the next day after they reconnected. He told Jennifer, quote, I am glad you have had Jamie in your life. It looks like you have made a great family, and what you have is unique and special, and I don't want to break that up. That being said, I know my heart and you still possess it. I love you. End quote. Again, this was one day after they reconnected, after decades of not speaking. Jennifer told Darren that the affection in her relationship with Jamie had decreased and she didn't feel as committed to him anymore. Within just a few days of reconnecting, they were both drafting a 5-year plan in which Jennifer would leave Jamie and they could be together. So as detectives are going through these emails, they're like, okay, this just affirms what they knew about Jennifer and Darren being crazy for each other. But they start to dig deeper, and they realize this went much further. In April 2020, about 3 weeks after they had reconnected, Jennifer sent Darren 2 emails. The first one read, quote, I can tell Jamie is texting you. Sorry, end quote. The next one was sent shortly after that and said, quote, I love you. I am sorry this has become such a mess. We just need to get through today somehow. Once Jamie starts to believe you're gone, it will be better. I don't know what he is saying, but whatever he's telling you, I am okay. I can handle this if I don't lose you. Please talk to me. I need you. End quote. To this email, Darren responded, quote, I know today has been horrible again. You are being so strong for us. Jamie cannot destroy us no matter how hard he tries. End quote. And he stated that he only wanted Jennifer more and that Jamie could not keep him from her. Later that day, Darren told Jennifer that Jamie had started texting again and had, quote unquote, lost his mind. Investigators thought that Jamie may have messaged Darren after learning about their emotional affair, but this was odd because even though they didn't have much of Darren's text history, detectives couldn't find any evidence of contact between Darren and Jamie's cell phones in the data provided by Darren's phone provider. At first, it wasn't clear what Jamie was saying to Darren, but as investigators continued to review the emails, it seemed like Jamie was threatening to take Jennifer away somewhere and have other men sexually assault her. He was describing what he would do to Jennifer in graphic details in his messages to Darren. It seemed like these were more than threats and that these assaults had actually happened. Soon after Jamie threatened to assault Jennifer, Darren emailed Jennifer, quote, I was with you through it all. You did so good. He really thinks he broke you and has driven me off. We beat him, end quote. Darren wanted to get Jennifer away from Jamie, but recognized this was Jennifer's decision. Their emails also implied that Jamie had been contacting Darren through Jennifer's cell phone, explaining why there was no evidence of contact with Jamie's phone. A few days after the abuse and taunting started, Jamie emailed Darren with the subject, quote, please stay away, end quote. In the email, Jamie asked Darren to leave his family alone and said that he's the one that's been there for Jennifer and their family. Darren responded and mentioned the horrible things Jamie had done to her and wrote, quote, I am at a loss to see how a man that says he loves her and needs her in his life could treat her like that. I saw how bad she is hurting, and I am very concerned for her safety there. I have been talking to her at night because she is terrified of you. I will for sure keep checking in on her until I feel you have regained some sense and can control yourself around Jennifer. Do you actually see how you are making her feel? You alone are destroying what you have there. Be the husband you say you want to be. Respect her. Let her feel safe around you and being home with you. End quote. Jamie responded the next day basically telling Darren to butt out and that he was done communicating with him. He said, quote, my priority now is to make sure Jennifer knows where she belongs and who she belongs to, and you can check in with her all you want. She'll learn what to tell you and what not to. End quote. Now, the next part is where the emails start going into graphic sexual acts and mentions of sexual assault. I ask that viewers and listeners observe caution if you don't want to listen to this. I would recommend skipping forward about 2 to 3 minutes, but we will put the timestamps in the description.
They will also be on screen in the YouTube video.
According to the emails, shortly after they reconnected, Jamie had been physically and sexually abusing Jennifer and inviting men to sexually abuse her. The abuse would take place nearly every weekend, and Jamie would email Darren with graphic details of the abuse. In May, Darren got an email from Jamie where he taunted Darren again and said Jennifer had probably stopped telling him about all the horrible things Jamie was doing to her. He said, quote, I am finally going to get what I want from her this weekend. Make sure you ask her about it. Look up any rough gangbang triple penetration with breath control porn, and that's what we'll be doing to her. End quote. He continued to taunt Darren, saying that if Jennifer didn't tell him about it, he would send details. Later in May, Jamie sent Darren another email with the subject, quote, injuries old and new, end quote. And this email contained 7 close-up images of injuries to Jennifer's body that included a bloody lip, bruises, and injuries to her neck, and he taunted Darren that he couldn't do anything about it. Jamie sent another email describing in detail how he and his friends violently sexually assaulted Jennifer and how she'd begged for them to let her go. Darren threatened to take the evidence to the police and American Airlines unless he promised to stop hurting Jennifer. He told Jamie that he would keep all the evidence for the next decade, which was in line with Texas's 10-year statute of limitations on sexual assault. But at the same time, he emailed Jennifer that he wouldn't go to the police without her consent, but begged her to leave Jamie. Instead of backing down, Jamie escalated and sent more close-up images of Jennifer being sexually abused. Jennifer refused to go to the police and was afraid that Jamie would lash out at her and her daughter, and said that she didn't want her daughter to know the truth about Jamie. Since Jennifer wouldn't go to the police, Darren asked her to at least confide in a friend that was closer to her in Texas. She gave Darren the email of a coworker named Rob Schmidt that she'd known for over 15 years. She saw him as a close friend and someone she could confide in. Darren reached out to Rob and told him about the physical and sexual abuse that Jennifer was enduring and Jamie's taunting of him with messages and pictures, and asked for Rob's help in helping Jennifer get out of the situation. Rob was shocked at this because he'd known Jamie and didn't think that he was capable of this. But Darren told Rob that Jamie's assault had resulted in Jennifer needing to take an entire week off of work, and also in her getting a UTI that she was unable to recover from due to the ongoing assault. Darren also told Rob the names of some of the people involved. He claimed that one of Jamie's longtime friends, Jeremy Gebler, was involved and would often participate. He thought that Jamie was trying to make it so that no one else would want Jennifer. Rob also couldn't understand why Jennifer hadn't gone to the police, but speculated that she was probably blaming herself and wanted to spare Jamie. Darren hoped that he and Rob could convince Jennifer to leave, but for Darren, it was reassuring to have someone closer by that knew about the abuse. Rob told Darren that he called Jamie to confront him, and he just denied it and accused Jennifer of making it all up. In his email to Darren, he said, quote, "To be honest, it makes me want to kill the guy," end quote. Rob and Darren continued to talk about how they could help Jennifer. Rob even started sharing more information with Darren that Jennifer had only been sharing with him, including a photo indicated that Jamie had been burning her. The emails escalated, and Darren was getting daily emails from Jennifer and Jamie describing in detail what Jennifer was going through. Jennifer told Darren that Jamie had held her head underwater in their hot tub and forced her to perform oral sex on him. She'd lost consciousness and had only regained it after Jamie performed CPR on her. Darren continued to encourage Jennifer to go to the police, but Jennifer didn't want Jamie to retaliate and harm her or her daughter. These emails went on for months, and on October 1st, 2020, Jamie texted Darren, taunting him and saying that he had something special planned for their 15-year anniversary. He said that he'd liked the hot tub experience where Jennifer had almost died so much that he was going to recreate it the weekend of their anniversary and, quote, "see how many guys Jennifer could handle," end quote. He told Darren that he already had 7 guys committed to the assault. And I will say, we typically wouldn't go into graphic details like this, but I think for this case, it was important to do so, because this email thread shifted the assumptions that detectives had about Darren Lopez's motive to kill Jamie. Instead of jealousy, they realized that Jamie had been murdered the day before this assault was supposed to happen, and that this threat was what had prompted Darren to kill Jamie. This also gave more clarity to the overkill and groin shot that Jamie had endured, and they concluded that Darren was clearly prompted to kill by a desire to save Jennifer. However, the descriptions of Jamie's actions didn't align with how those who knew him described him and his relationship with Jennifer. Police tracked down Jeremy Gebler, who'd been mentioned in the emails as participating in the assaults, and on top of Jeremy being shocked by and denying any involvement in or knowledge of Jennifer being assaulted, Jeremy, who lived 800 miles away in Arizona, was confirmed to not be anywhere near Jamie and Jennifer on the weekends where it was alleged that he'd participated in Jennifer's assault. Jeremy was also one of the people that was in the text message thread where Jennifer would provide updates on Jamie's case, so it made detectives wonder why she would do that if she were afraid of Jeremy. Jennifer's coworker Rob was also in this group chat, and when detectives interviewed him and showed him the emails between himself and Darren, he was shocked and stated that he'd never sent those emails and had never heard of Darren Lopez. When detectives looked into the email accounts, they found that the emails associated with Rob Schmidt had been created on the same day Rob began emailing Darren. The same was also true for the email associated with Jamie. Furthermore, both Rob and Jamie's email accounts were deleted at the same time a couple days before Jamie's murder. When investigators looked into Jennifer's computer, they found the emails sent between her and Darren. They also found the images that Jamie had shared with Darren when he was taunting him. Some of the images where Jennifer was shown bruised were actually images from a car accident she'd been in 8 years earlier. Others were stock images Jennifer had downloaded from the internet. The images that Jamie claimed showed Jennifer's sexual abuse were actually screenshots from porn videos. An FBI investigation revealed that Jennifer was the only one behind the email sent to Darren from Jamie and Rob. Jamie and Darren had never been in contact. Jennifer was sending multiple emails to Darren from the 3 accounts while also constantly texting Darren. This investigation also couldn't find any evidence that Jamie had abused Jennifer, and they concluded that Jennifer had made everything up.
I'm so disgusted that I could throw up because there are people in this world who are abused in that way. There are people in this world who are married to horrible people who do that to them, who do those real things. And there are people who have suffered in real ways. And I have zero sympathy for people who lie about sexual assault, people who lie about sexual abuse, because it is one of the most devastating things you could ever experience in your entire life. And for you to just make that up, to just go on to Pornhub and start sending things, screenshotting, making things up. This woman has to be one of the sickest and most twisted individuals that I think we've covered.
I would fully agree with that. And before me and Dev started recording part 2, I told Dev I was sorry. And this is what I'm sorry for. Because going in, you probably thought, okay, she manipulated Darren into thinking she was in love with him so that he could murder her husband. She took it a million steps further.
Oh, she took it to hell.
Yeah.
But also, and not only do you make all this up, but you implicate real people with real lives who you just clearly don't give a damn about. And you know what was really upsetting for me, Cam, is probably through the first 2 minutes of you speaking, I was like, damn, like Jamie is being abusive to Jennifer. It's crazy that we really just don't know people. But then you kept talking and you kept talking. And I was like, she made all this up. You were about halfway through when I was like, she made all this up. And it put a pit in my stomach because it also upset me that the society that we live in, I had that thought at all.
Yeah. Because like you said, unfortunately, there are people in relationships like that.
Right.
There are people getting abused. And I think what makes her doing this so bad is the fact that Jamie was such a good guy. The fact that he cared so much about her and her daughter. He treated her daughter like she was his daughter.
Right.
And to put such dirty and evil actions on his name, knowing that he has been nothing but great to you, truly evil.
Completely evil. And y'all know that I'm not particularly quiet on this podcast, but I was just sitting there. I was just sitting there becoming more and more upset by the moment because, again, I was like, she made all this up. And it upset me because, you know, I do tend to look internally and try to check myself when I have those feelings. And I was like, I want to be wrong so bad. And I hate that. I hate that I sat here was hoping that she didn't make up this horrific abuse, that she didn't lie and manipulate this man, that she didn't drag other people into her lies and her nonsense and her foolishness. And I hate that I sat here wanting the abuse to be true because I just didn't want to believe that somebody would be so vile as to lie so specifically.
Right.
Who does that? Who freaking does that?
And makes up other personas, makes up another persona to continue the lie. And I think the other thing too is to barrage him with these details.
Right. Go out of your way to send pictures that are old from Pornhub, from Google, whatever, to go do research to fulfill the lie.
Right.
I will say though, and this was also something that was irritating me when I still believed that she wasn't lying. I understand this thought process behind like, I don't want to go to the police without that person's consent. But if what Jennifer claimed was true, her life was in danger. And there comes a point where you have to push that aside.
Right.
Because also, according to the emails, he's sending you all the evidence. There comes a time where you have to text Jennifer and be like, I love you. And I'm sorry that you're going with this, but I will not stand by and allow you to die on my watch, knowing that all this is happening. Again, in a world where this isn't complete horse, it's completely irresponsible of him to not call the police to a certain point. Because there's a balance, it is terrifying and scary and dangerous for people to leave abusive relationships. It's the most dangerous time for a person to leave. It is most often the time that they are assaulted, killed, traumatized, all of that. So I understand. But if I'm aware that me not calling the police will guarantee your death one day, you're going to have to just hate me forever because I'm calling the police.
Yeah,
I am. So that also frustrated me before I had settled into believing that she had made all this up.
And to add injury to insult, further investigation would reveal that Jennifer had previously contacted her exes to tell them that she was being abused by her current partner in order to provoke a reaction from them. Jennifer's second husband stated that he and Jennifer started dating while she was separated from her first husband, and she had confided in him that her first husband had physically, emotionally, and sexually abused her and would torture her and allow his friends to sexually assault her. When he asked her to go to the police, Jennifer refused and instead told him that she wished her husband were dead. As Jennifer continued to tell him about her abuse, he increasingly wanted to kill her first husband, and they'd even come up with a plan where he would shoot her husband while he was gardening. At the last minute, Jennifer changed her mind and said she didn't want to kill the father of her child. Instead, she divorced him and married her second husband. After they got married, the second husband started getting emails from two men saying that Jennifer was attractive and that he didn't appreciate her enough. They got divorced shortly after this, and her second husband said that he felt like Jennifer was the one behind the emails. This also was what made him question her stories about the abuse from her first husband. When being interviewed about this, he stated that being with Jennifer was like, quote, swimming in a sea of lies, manipulation, and pain, end quote.
Oh, that poor man. And here's also the thing that I was thinking about. I would be curious to read some of these emails and everything too, but people tend to have a tone when they text, when they write. Like Cam texts in a very specific way, which is different from how my sister texts, which is different from how I text, how I write emails. There's a tone there. So I'm sure he's thinking it's probably Jennifer sending these emails because it sounds like her. It's got that same tone and energy and everything about that.
I don't think the second husband thought that. I think what really made him think that was the stories about her husband. And just after they get married, there are these emails that just seemed out of place. It could have been the tone. It could have also just seemed like an off situation.
Yeah. Oh, but that's another thing that just makes me sick to my stomach is, babes, you have track record. You have a track record. And being the father of your child is the only thing that saved that man's life. But also, for our second husband, why would you marry somebody who you had planned a murder with? Murder of their first husband. This is kind of how I feel about people who marry their affair partners. How do you ever feel secure in those relationships? If she was comfortable enough to plan the murder of the father of her child, what makes you feel safe in this relationship?
I would say that he probably was more focused on the fact that he thought her first husband was abusive, and that was why they were going to murder him. It wasn't just like she needs the life insurance money. It was he has abused and tortured me and he deserves to die for it. So I would say it would be more of that thought process and less of, oh, we're going to kill him and get money for it.
Understandable. But
and he would also know I am not that type of person. I am going to protect her and love her.
Absolutely. I can give you that argument. That makes sense. But for me, I would never feel secure in the situation because I know that like you are comfortable talking about murder. You're comfortable just killing people to deal with problems, even in context of him being a horribly abusive partner and everything. I fear people who have the capacity to plan a murder.
And one thing that her second husband said was, after a certain point, she makes you feel like it was your idea.
Sounds like a master manipulator to me.
And I think that's the other piece too, is it's not just they were planning a murder. She's manipulating him emotionally.
Yeah.
She's tugging on that piece of him that feels the need to protect her.
Yeah. Oh, and that's so sick and twisted. And God, this just dawned on me too. God forbid they have any kind of history with like seeing their mother be abused by their father or some other man or their sister or whatever. Yeah. God forbid they have some kind of deep connection that pulls on them even more.
Yeah. And so, Dev, earlier you said that the reason that her first husband didn't die is because he was the father of her child. But investigators actually believe that he didn't die because Jennifer didn't think the second husband could do it. They believe that Jennifer actually targeted Darren because of his combat experience and his trauma in the military, which he had told her all about. During his time in the military, there were instances where he'd watched his comrades die in his arms. So being able to save others became really important to him. He'd been diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury and PTSD while in the military. Jennifer had told Darren that she was also a brain injury specialist and had helped many veterans and convinced Darren to send her a copy of his medical records. These records included details of Darren's depression, ADHD, migraines, vision difficulties, and PTSD, as well as his medications and test results showing that his cognitive and memory function were below average. Jennifer would have been able to deduce how vulnerable he was to her manipulation, and detectives believed that she used Darren's emotions to exploit him. And they were also able to conclude that it seemed like Jamie had no idea that Jennifer was engaged in this emotional affair. They'd gone on multiple trips in recent months to visit Jamie's family, and none of them reported anything being amiss within Jamie and Jennifer's relationship.
One, I knew she was lying to him. I knew she was lying about her credentials. Knew it. Two, this is a sick, twisted, evil woman. Oh, I can't get over that this is a sick and twisted, evil woman. I'm so hot right now. I'm so hot. I'm so pissed off. Because also, y'all at home know this too. I have a special place in my heart for veterans, specifically taking advantage of veterans that this country doesn't take care of, that we don't do enough for. And you specifically requested his medical records so that you could manipulate him, so that you could be the abuser.
Exactly. And investigators and prosecutors thought that if they showed Darren the evidence of Jennifer's lies, they could get him to turn on her. But when they showed him this, he refused to believe that Jennifer had lied, and he was convinced that Jamie had been torturing and abusing her. He clearly didn't trust anyone but Jennifer. His attorney couldn't even get him to accept the truth. He stood beside her even when her lies were exposed to the public. Shortly before her lies were exposed, she'd sent him a letter beginning with the secret code they used to verify it was actually Jennifer writing the message, and stated, quote, "Just a quick note to say I never lied to you and I never sent you the emails from any account but mine, as me. You once said you would never believe anything about me unless you heard it from me. I hope that's still true. There is a ton more I wish I could say, but I can't right now. Soon, hopefully." End quote. Darren's disbelief continued for 6 months until one of his daughters set him down and made him see the truth. Now that he'd been released from Jennifer's trance, he agreed to tell investigators the full story of what happened. According to Darren, despite his feelings for Jennifer, he was willing to take things slow so that Jennifer's daughter wouldn't think badly of him and accuse him of breaking up their family. He encouraged Jennifer to be honest with Jamie and even thought Jamie might be open to sharing Jennifer. After Jennifer told Darren she'd come clean to Jamie, that's when things began to change. Darren recounted to investigators how Jamie's abuse escalated and how Jennifer would call him constantly to tell him about the abuse, often keeping him from sleeping. In addition to the assaults detailed in the emails, Jennifer told Darren that Jamie kept her tied up, restricted her diet, and had forcibly cut her hair. He soon felt like he was losing his mind, but Jennifer made him swear not to go to the authorities and said that if he told the police, she would deny everything. In October 2020, Jennifer told Darren she wanted Jamie dead and was thinking of ways to kill him. She talked about poisoning him, but told Darren she was afraid of what would happen to her and her daughter if she got caught. At first, Darren said he was shocked by this conversation and didn't get involved in the planning, and even tried to get her to rethink what she was planning. Jennifer refused to leave Jamie because of her fear of him, and when Darren proposed that she and her daughter could come stay with him, she said that couldn't happen because her daughter had to stay in Texas for work. However, Darren said that his reluctance to kill Jamie went away when who he believed was Jamie began taunting Darren with the details of the upcoming gang assault on Jennifer for their 15th anniversary. He told investigators that he decided to kill Jamie just the day before his murder and promised Jennifer that she'd never have to experience the terrible things Jamie did to her again. He departed for Texas the afternoon before Jamie's murder and continued to remind himself that he was doing this to protect Jennifer and her daughter. He turned his phone off as he got close to the Texas border, but had to turn it back on when he got to Dallas because he'd gotten lost. Even though he knew this could be tied back to him and used to convict him if he were caught, he thought that saving Jennifer from her fate was more important. When he got to Jamie and Jennifer's house, He went to the vacant house next door that Jennifer had told him about. He hid behind the house and waited until he heard their door open. He saw Jennifer walk past with their dog and then saw Jamie walk by. He immediately came up on Jamie and shot and killed him. And he also admitted to police that the groin shot was payback for the sexual abuse he believed Jamie had exacted on Jennifer. He stole Jamie's ring to make it look like a random robbery and then attacked Jennifer. He actually hadn't warned Jennifer he would do this because he wanted her reaction to be genuine. When he noticed their neighbor Emery come over, Darren stopped. He'd only wanted to hurt Jamie, so when Emery ran off to get his gun, Darren got back in his truck and left. He stated that he drove off slowly because he didn't want to accidentally hit any of the neighbors that were coming into the street. He also told investigators that he chose not to dispose of the murder weapon because he didn't want it to be used in any other murders. Despite Jennifer's public pleas for justice for Jamie, Darren told investigators that she was happy Jamie had been killed. She gave Darren money, gifts, and praised him for what he did. Once he had accepted that Jennifer had lied, Darren was devastated that he'd taken an innocent man's life and couldn't believe that Jennifer would do that to her own daughter. He told investigators that he felt like Jennifer had turned him into a monster.
I'm saddened once again that his children had to be involved for him to see the light, but I'm glad that the light was seen nonetheless. I want to make it very clear. I don't condone this man's actions whatsoever. Even under the circumstances that he was presented, you do not get to be judge, jury, and executioner, even in those circumstances. However, the human in me feels bad for him. The human in me feels bad that he did indeed throw his life away for this woman who lied to him, manipulated him, strategically chose him, plotted on his downfall at every possible step. And I do feel bad for him because I do believe in my heart of hearts that he does feel guilty, that he does feel awful, that he took an innocent man's life based on a woman's lies. I do believe that.
Yeah, and I think too, it happens way too often. Maybe not to this extent, but it does happen often that people are manipulated into killing someone else, either by someone's lies or someone's manipulative actions.
Absolutely. Because when she said, I would kill him, but what would happen to me if I did it? But I don't care about you, so you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what's also interesting is people truly believe, for some stupid reason, that if they are not the ones to pull the trigger, that they're scot-free in a murder. I don't understand how you could be so stupid and deluded, but people truly believe that even if I set this person up completely and go out of my way to ensure their murder, as long as I don't actually do the murdering, there's nothing the police can do.
And I don't even think she believed that. I do think she believed that Darren would take the fall for her.
Oh, I absolutely believe that. I absolutely believe that she was so confident in the spell that she had cast upon this man. And in all honesty, why wouldn't she be confident in that spell? She had already gotten this man to kill a man for her.
Mm-hmm.
So why wouldn't she be confident that he would take the fall?
Exactly. So now we're going to move on to the trials in this case. In September 2021, after Darren confessed, Jennifer's charges were upgraded from obstruction of justice to using interstate commerce in the commission of murder for hire, which is a federal offense that carries the death penalty. And Jennifer was placed in custody pending her trial. Jennifer maintained her not guilty plea and even told her father in a letter that the prosecution and media had twisted the facts to paint her in a bad light. However, after Jennifer was told that Darren was cooperating with the prosecution, she decided to enter a guilty plea and skip trial. In exchange for dropping the obstruction of justice charge and removing the death penalty from the sentencing recommendation, she agreed to tell the truth. She admitted that Jamie had only ever been a loving and caring husband, and that she'd used online identities and misleading images to provoke Darren into killing Jamie. After he killed Jamie, Jennifer admitted that she'd showered Darren with gifts and affection to maintain his loyalty. In May of 2022, Jennifer had her sentencing hearing. The judge criticized how she treated Darren and said, quote, "He thought he was the only person who could save you. You tricked him because you thought his brain wasn't working," end quote. The judge also criticized how she tried to manipulate When Jennifer started to cry, the judge said, quote, "Mrs. Faith, I'm not sure why you're crying. What you did was such a betrayal. You are pure evil, not to mention disgusting, end quote. Jennifer Faith was sentenced to life in prison and was ordered to pay $6,500 in restitution to Jamie's family for his unpaid funeral expenses and was fined $250,000. Now, on to Darren Lopez's trial. Darren pleaded not guilty to the murder charge, and his trial began in July 2023, nearly 3 years after Jamie's murder. His defense was specifically trying to get the jury to charge him with manslaughter instead of murder. Darren's defense claimed that Jennifer was the truly guilty person and that she'd taken advantage of his disability and his feelings for her and knew how to exploit them for her gain. They said that his trauma made him view danger differently and that he genuinely believed that Jennifer's life was in danger and that he was the only one who could take the necessary action to protect her. They were essentially pushing a self-defense of a third-person argument. However, the prosecution pointed out that Texas law stipulates that self-defense is only justified if the person reasonably believes that force is necessary to protect themselves or others from imminent harm, and there was nothing imminent about the harm Darren perceived. 186 days had passed since Darren first learned about the abuse, giving him ample time to consider other options like reaching out to Jennifer's family, Jamie's employer, or the authorities. Even though Darren had considered these options over email, the prosecution said he didn't actually give them much thought. It also took him 10 hours to drive to Dallas and 5 hours to wait for Jamie and Jennifer to leave their home, and the prosecution pointed out how this went against the immediate requirement needed for a self-defense claim. The prosecution called his use of force unnecessary and said that what he did was the most dishonorable thing that someone who cared so much about honor could do. They also pointed out that with his experience as a Special Forces soldier, Darren should have been able to investigate Jennifer's abuse. It should have also stood out to him that Jamie, who was a tech whiz and held a high position at a well-known and regulated company, would just send evidence of his crimes via an unencrypted email and from an address bearing his name. The prosecution argued that there was no evidence his disability took away his critical thinking skills. When he was asked on the stand why he didn't further investigate Jennifer's claims, he testified that he, quote, put his faith in Jennifer, end quote. The prosecution went a step further and claimed that Darren knew that Jennifer's claims of abuse were false. They called attention to the fact that Darren and Jennifer had done detailed sexual roleplay and had bought sex toys for each other. On top of this, some of their roleplay fantasies included Jennifer being sexually assaulted by multiple men while Darren watched or participated. Some of these conversations would take place soon after Jennifer would tell Darren about the abuse she was going through. Rather than Darren believing Jennifer was in trouble, the prosecution claimed that the emails were part of their fantasy. They also called into question Darren's claim that his decision to kill Jamie was a last-minute decision and stated that the many calls in the weeks leading up to Jamie's death were made so that Jennifer and Jamie could discuss their plan. Jennifer had sent him information about when her pool cleaner would come to the house and how Texas license plates were displayed. In a text sent before October, Darren texted Jennifer, quote, "I'm just going to take the freeways," end quote, which happened to be the route he took on October 8th on his way to kill Jamie Faith. The prosecution told the jury that Jamie Faith was the only victim in this case. The trial lasted 3 days, and the jury deliberated for just an hour and a half before returning a verdict of guilty for Jamie's murder. However, at his sentencing, the jury deliberated for several hours as they couldn't decide on how long to sentence him. In the end, they sentenced him to 62 years in prison.
Whoa, I have thoughts. First of all, sir, you've been told that you've been manipulated, you were lied to, and you accept that now, and we still plead not guilty to the first-degree murder, and we go to trial on it. I'm going to be honest with you. When you were saying that the defense was hoping for a lighter sentence, I was hoping, okay, maybe they're going with a third-degree murder, a second-degree murder, something that is still potentially going to be a life sentence at his age, but might potentially get him out of jail in his 60s.
Mm-hmm.
But manslaughter? And then you try to sprinkle some self-defense in there? What? That makes no sense whatsoever. I think that's a very stupid argument. But if we sprinkle a little self-defense in it, that explains why he took the stand in his own defense, which I'm so sorry, 98% of the time is stupid. Yeah. I know of 2 very specific cases where somebody getting on the stand helped them. And I covered one of them on this podcast.
Which was the football player.
Yes, Travis. But I've covered plenty of other cases. You've covered plenty of other cases where getting on the stand is always bad for you. So yeah, I don't like the defense's argument. I think that doesn't make any sense. There had to have been some kind of way to potentially get him a lighter sentence, a lesser charge. But this is murder. Dude.
Yeah.
Any way you slice it, this is murder. You made the intentional decision to go kill somebody. That is murder.
Where I will disagree with the prosecution is their claim that he knew that Jennifer was lying.
Yeah, I definitely raised an eyebrow at that point too. I didn't like that because how do you know that?
Right. And I think what they were trying to do with that was really take away any inkling that he could be a victim in this case, because I'm sure they wanted the maximum sentence.
That's fair. But in that same vein, being a victim does not automatically negate you from the consequences of your actions. Ask the amount of women who are in prison because they killed their abuser.
Right.
It doesn't negate you.
Yeah.
And I still stand by my stance of earlier where I condemn his actions. I don't support what he did, but I do feel bad for him.
Right. Because even their claim that, oh, there's no evidence that your critical thinking skills were reduced. I actually think with head injuries and showing that he had cognitive decline, there actually is some evidence of that. We can look at it and say, why would you believe that a director of technology would send incriminating evidence over an unencrypted email? But when you add on to this, the feelings he had for Jennifer and any other potential effects from his brain injury, I do think it makes it more believable that he put so much trust in her. And something I didn't necessarily include in this was, as a member of the Special Forces, he had to remember a set of facts that only he would know, just in case he ever needed to verify his identity. Some of those facts revolved around the time he spent with Jennifer when he was young. So even though he and Jennifer had broken up when they were really young, for the entirety of his Special Forces career, she was front and center in his mind. And I think that made his emotional connection to her even that much stronger. And you pair that with his experience of losing his friends in battle, seeing them die, and feeling that need to protect. I think it does make it more believable that he believed her.
Absolutely. And then you couple all of that information with the fact that he told her, I love you, the day after they reconnected.
Yeah.
And in my heart of hearts, I believe he meant that because he'd been loving her since 1993, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
He meant that. And she took advantage of that. I definitely don't agree with all the prosecution's arguments in that case. I don't think you need to try to make Darren a bad person to prove that he committed a murder.
Right.
I don't think that's necessary. The facts of the case are he did it.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you believe that for some reason he didn't believe Jennifer and created this whole scheme.
I think the most compelling piece of evidence for that claim is the fact that their sexual role play included rape fantasies and these gangbang sexual assault fantasies, especially soon after she told him that she'd been assaulted. I think if I continue along with the thought that he still believed her, I feel like this was more him playing along with her than it was him prompting these fantasies.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, you know, something that is really important to remember, it doesn't apply in this case because Jennifer is a liar, but there are instances where trauma of a sexual nature can result in hypersexualization, especially if the trauma takes place when you're very young. So since that is a possibility, and I understand that, that was another thing that rubbed me the wrong way a little bit, was when they were saying like, oh, but she has rape fantasies. It's not actually all that uncommon that that happens because it still becomes a power situation of like, I'm consenting to taking the power away, so I still have control in the situation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not uncommon for that to be a thing, which is why I wasn't particularly persuaded by the argument. But I can see both sides of this coin. You know?
And I think for them, it was more the fact that he willingly participated in these right after being told that she had experienced this.
Mm-hmm.
And, oh, you want to protect her from this. You think it's so horrible this happened to her. But here you are getting off on y'all imagining this happening to her. So I think it was less so the fact that she was into this and more the fact that you, Darren, willingly participated in this. But again, I feel like it was probably prompted by her.
Right.
And he was like, well, this is the woman I love. If this is what she wants, I'm all game.
Right. And also, let's be realistic here too. If we're talking about this in a sexual connotation, are you then going to stop the sexual conversation to be like, but isn't this traumatic for you? No, you're not.
Right.
Like, come on. You're not going to bring up the traumatic experience over a sexting experience. You're not doing that. Like, I feel very strongly about this because I don't like the argument.
Yeah.
I'm going to put my bias out there. I don't like this argument.
Yeah, I think their argument of trying to paint him as knowing more than he did, I definitely think it falls flat for me.
Yes.
And it really is them just trying to make him more of the evil person and trying to remove any belief the jury could have that he's also a victim and any impact that could have on their conviction and sentencing of him.
Yeah, absolutely. I can understand that. And quick side note, the judge who sentenced Jennifer, you need an award. I'm not going to lie to you. One of the things that has become one of my favorite parts of trial is listening to the judge sentence somebody, specifically when they do choose to make a statement. There are some judges that I really wanted to hear from, and they literally said, okay, I sentence you to life. You have a good day. And they left. But the judge has heard everything. They've heard pre-trial motions. They've heard motions in limine. They've heard what's going to get suppressed, what's going to be brought in. They've heard everything. And after hearing absolutely everything, they get their chance to see how they feel about the defendant or convicted person. And I do enjoy when judges rightfully rip them a new ass.
Yeah.
Especially when he said, what are you crying for?
Literally. That girl, you did this to yourself.
Come on now. That's right up there. It was like, were you crying when you did it? You weren't crying when you did it. So don't start crying in this courtroom now. Love it.
So after his sentencing, Darren reached out to the governor of Texas to get a reduction in his sentence. In an interview with Dateline, Darren said that he accepted the consequences of his actions, but held that his sentence should be reduced because Jennifer Faith was truly guilty. He also stated that the jury hadn't been totally informed that his confession to police had helped secure Jennifer's conviction. In December 2024, he appealed his sentence, stating that there was insufficient evidence for the jury to reject his claim that he was acting in defense of Jennifer. The appeals court upheld the judgment of the trial court and affirmed his original sentence. And just speaking to the community's reaction to this, Jennifer and Jamie's community were devastated that she'd exploited them for their money and kindness. The friend who set up the fundraiser ended up being fully reimbursed and was able to return all of the money to people who had donated.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. And police weren't the only people who were suspicious of Jennifer. Apparently, some of the neighbors thought it was weird that Jennifer had been largely spared since she was a witness. In the 911 call, one of the neighbors said, "It seems like something out of a movie." This was in the 911 call. Also, soon after the murder, Jennifer had cropped Jamie out of her profile picture. I believe this was on Facebook.
This is what I'm talking about. You guys make it so obvious that you're terrible people.
And that neighbor, Emery, who had seen Darren up close, specifically grew suspicious when during one of their walks, he mentioned that he'd seen the gunman, and Jennifer immediately stopped walking and asked him if the shooter seemed Black or Hispanic. When Emery said he couldn't tell, Jennifer didn't ask him any other questions, which Emery found strange, and he stopped walking with her after this.
People at home, listen to your spidey senses, because that's a man who listened to his spidey senses.
Yeah, and I will say, even though Jennifer had pretty much scammed her community, they said that they didn't regret it. They said that if another neighbor was in trouble, they would do it again.
See, and that's what's beautiful, and that's a real community, because yes, this person took advantage of us, but that doesn't mean that everybody is bad.
Exactly.
That we're not going to take care of our own.
A friend of Jamie's said, quote, "Not having Jamie in our group definitely left a hole. I just miss my friend," end quote. They described Jamie as a rare person who genuinely cared for others. Jennifer's daughter, who was extremely close to Jamie, moved away from Dallas after her mother's sentencing. But as of 2023, she apparently still spoke to her mom twice a week. Jamie's memorial services were held just a week after his death in mid-October. Despite the horrific nature of his murder and Jennifer's part in it, those close to him said that the services were meticulously planned and contained so many positive memories of Jamie. And I think that is the only positive thing that she did for him. And that's the end of our story.
That was absolutely the only positive thing that she did for him. And he gave her everything.
Right.
He took her in, He loved her. They wore matching outfits on the cruise ship. Thank you for sharing this story, friend. Because though I am obviously saddened of how he met his demise, again, I do love hearing stories about just good men. I feel like especially in society now, there is a little bit of this men aren't trustworthy or men aren't doing X, Y, and Z, the red pillars of the world and whatnot. And it's beautiful to see a man who was caring, who was kind to his soul and did the right thing to his soul. And it's tragic that he met the end that he did. He didn't deserve it. He didn't deserve for his name to be slandered and dragged through the mud because somebody wanted to lie on him for insurance money, for a 401k that you could have just had access to and worked through. It's infuriating. But thank you for sharing this story, friend. And I hope that Jamie's family and friends and community has peace. Peace in knowing that he was a good man through and through. That though the events of this story rocked their community, it did not change the community.
Right. I definitely agree with that. And I hope Jennifer has the life she deserves.
That part. As we wrap up today's discussion, we're going to move into our segment called Today in Crime, where we'll discuss a crime or crime-related event that took place on this day. So, on October 3rd, 1995, O.J. Simpson is found not guilty for the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ronald Goldman. At the end of a sensational trial, former football star O.J. Simpson is acquitted of the brutal 1994 double murder of his estranged wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend, Ronald Goldman. In the 252-day trial, Simpson's, quote, dream team, end quote, of lawyers employed creative and controversial methods to convince jurors that O.J. Simpson's guilt had not been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, thus surmounting what the prosecution called a, quote, mountain of evidence, end quote, implicating him as the murderer. O.J. Simpson, a Heisman Trophy winner, star running back with the Buffalo Bills, and popular television personality, married Nicole Brown in 1985. He reportedly regularly abused his wife and in 1989 pled no contest to a charge of spousal battery. In 1992, Nicole left him and filed for divorce. On the night of June 12, 1994, Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman were stabbed and slashed to death in front of the yard of Mrs. Simpson's condominium in Brentwood, Los Angeles. By June 17th, police had gathered enough evidence to charge O.J. Simpson with the murders. Simpson had no alibi for the time frame of the murders. Some 40 minutes after the murders were committed, a limousine driver sent to take Simpson to the airport saw a man in dark clothing hurrying up the drive of his Rockingham estate. A few minutes later, Simpson spoke to the driver through the gate phone and let him in. During the previous 25 minutes, the driver had repeatedly called the house and received no answer. A single leather glove found outside Simpson's home matched a glove found at the crime scene. In preliminary DNA test, blood found on the glove was shown to have come from Simpson and the two victims. After his arrest, further DNA tests would confirm this finding. Simpson had a wound on his hand, and his blood was a DNA match to drops found at the Brentwood crime scene. Nicole Brown Simpson's blood was discovered on a pair of socks found at the Rockingham estate. Simpson had recently purchased a, quote, stiletto, end quote, knife of the type the coroner believed was used by the killer. Shoe prints in the blood at Brentwood matched Simpson's shoe size and later were shown to match a type of shoe he had owned. Neither the knife nor shoes were found by police. On June 7th, a warrant was put out for Simpson's arrest, but he refused to surrender. Just before 7 p.m., police located him in a white Ford Bronco being driven by his friend, former teammate Al Cowings. Al refused to pull over and told police over his cellular phone that Simpson was suicidal and had a gun to his head. Police agreed not to stop the vehicle by force, and a low-speed chase ensued. Los Angeles news helicopters learned of the events unfolding on their freeways, and live television coverage began. As millions watched, the Bronco was escorted across Los Angeles by a horde of police cars. Just before 8 p.m., the dramatic journey ended when Al pulled into the Rockingham estate. After an hour of tense negotiation, Simpson emerged from the vehicle and surrendered. In the vehicle was found a travel bag containing, among other things, Simpson's passport, a disguise kit consisting of a fake mustache and beard, and a revolver. 3 days later, Simpson appeared before a judge and pled not guilty. Simpson's subsequent criminal trial was a sensational media event of unprecedented proportions. It was the longest trial ever held in California, and courtroom television cameras captured the carnival-like atmosphere of the proceedings. The prosecution's mountain of evidence was systematically called into doubt by Simpson's team of expensive attorneys, who made the dramatic case that their client was framed by unscrupulous and racist police officers, citing the questionable character of Detective Mark Furman and alleged blunders in the police investigation. Defense lawyers painted Simpson as yet another African-American victim of the white judicial system. The jurors' reasonable doubt grew when the defense spent weeks attacking the damning DNA evidence, arguing in overly technical terms that delays and other anomalies in the gathering of evidence called the findings into question. In polls, a majority of African Americans believed Simpson to be innocent of the crime, while white America was confident of his guilt. However, the jury, made up of 9 African Americans, 2 whites, and 1 Hispanic American, was not so divided. They took just 4 hours of deliberation to reach the verdict of not guilty on both murder charges on October 3rd, 1995. And that is what happened on this day in crime. If you found this story interesting, leave a glove emoji in the comments.
Well, I don't see how they were claiming that the police were just racist because he's not black. He's OJ. So how did that work? But I just think the craziest part of this trial was him putting on that glove, fully not putting it on all the way and saying, it just don't fit.
I have just always thought that that was a stupid decision anyway. Putting on the glove doesn't mean anything, but it gives the defense, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit.
I think that's literally why he did it.
I'm just saying, like, as much as we all know he did it, and then he went on to write a book about it and everything, we all know he did it. But if the glove don't fit, you must acquit has to be one of the most iconic lines ever spoken.
It is, especially in a trial context.
Come on now.
I will say it's also an example of how juries can be swayed.
I agree. But in all honesty, I think the prosecution did a bad job in this case.
I agree.
And at the end of the day, I am a firm believer that the prosecution just doesn't get to convict people because they believe it happened. When you put racist cops on the stand, it's always going to come back and bite you. Because now the jury doesn't have to consider that person's testimony at all.
Right.
And once that person's testimony is thrown out, what's your case on? That's the thing that's always so interesting to me is the vast majority of the time, especially now that I do watch a lot of trials from start to finish, just like in my free time, 10 times out of 10, I can fully understand how the jury got there.
Mm-hmm.
In OJ's trial, I completely understand how the jury found him not guilty because the prosecution's case was poorly built. I do agree that they had a mountain of evidence. I do agree. But they presented it poorly. They did have racist cops take the stand, which isn't completely their fault because at the end of the day, the racist cop is the one who arrested him. So he's got to come in. It is a fact. But that's the case you were dealt with. And another place where OJ's attorneys were definitely better is they picked the perfect jury. They picked a jury primarily comprised of African Americans and then knew they were going to put that racist cop on the stand and knew that they would be able to turn black people against that racist cop. Yes. Rightfully so. So that was another place. The strategy of picking the jury was bad for the prosecution.
Mm-hmm.
They did a very poor job in this case, factually.
Yeah. But I still think it stands that the defense's tactic was to sway the jury. And they succeeded at that.
For sure.
Because like you said, they knew that they were going to put that cop on a stand. And the defense been working in this city the same way the prosecution has. They like, yeah, that's a racist cop. If we can bring out that racism, he's done.
Exactly. And all I'm saying is earned every penny of their check.
Yes, for sure.
Like, y'all can be mad at me. Again, we all know OJ did it. But the defense attorneys earned every cent of their check.
Agreed. Any other thoughts, friend?
Nope. That's all I've got.
Thank you again to our listeners for joining us on part 2 of this case. I would again like to thank the Case Vault podcast and 48 Hours for providing most of the material for this episode. If you like to check out photos related to this case, follow us at Criminalish Podcast on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
Listeners, if you like what you hear, be sure to leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening to the Criminalish podcast. And if you're listening on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to our channel and leave any comments or questions down below. As always, stay nosy, my friends. Bye.
Bye.